Good evening and welcome. The Monday, November 5th, 2018 Board of Commissioner meeting is now in session. The Reverend Kimberly Farabee's been kind enough to come and give us the invocation and pledge of allegiance. If you could all rise.
Let us bow our heads. Gracious Father, we thank you for this awesome privilege and opportunity to come before you. Now, God, we ask that you'll bless us throughout this meeting, that you would guide us with wisdom, and God, that you allow us to do the affairs that you have prepared before us. Now we thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to
the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Reverend Farabee. You may be seated. First item this evening is approval of the agenda.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion for approval.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously. Moving on to public comment, I have Dr. Robert Weiniger here. If you would like to come forward, if you would state your name and address for the record. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Dr. Robert Weiniger, 906 Broomfield Trail, Elizabeth City. First of all, I want to start off by saying congratulations to the volleyball team. State championship's a great thing to have. When I came to speak with you earlier this year, I focused on enrollment, programs, and facilities, and I'll continue that theme tonight. Last year, we talked about we were estimating the growth for the school, and I'm happy to announce that the estimates we gave you last spring held for the year. Our head count was up 5%, and our full-time equivalent, or FTE, was up almost 3.5% last year. Really nice numbers for us, given that the rest of the state in total was down last year. Now, over the summer, I had some concerns about being able to maintain that growth. Community college presidents are in a very small minority when it comes to the way we look at the economy. Anybody else looks at a strong economy and low unemployment numbers and celebrates, and I do as well, but for community college presidents, that's also bad news, because the students who would normally come to us for training and for education so that they can get living wage jobs look around and find jobs plentiful, and they take a position that maybe, okay, I can understand the desire to go to work instead of coming to college. I get that. But maybe if you take a job that doesn't pay quite as much as the job you could have had if you had come to the college and got some more education or training, it's not always a good thing. So for the community colleges, good economies tend to be bad for us. So we look at that a little bit differently. Have some good news to share, though. While I was very concerned about that over the summer, and my staff will be happy to tell you how concerned I was, because I rode them pretty hard all summer long to push recruitment and retention. Our current estimates for the fall semester tell us we think we're going to be up about 6% in FTE this fall. Now, that's astounding, because every other president I've talked to says they were down last year and they're going to be down again this year.
Wow.
New programs. In the spring, we announced that an Associate of Science degree in agribusiness was under review by our accrediting agency. Happy to announce that a program was approved and our first class of students started this fall. We also talked last spring about an Emergency Medical Services Associate's degree. I just got news this morning from our accrediting agency that they should be letting me know later this month about that program as well. Now, we certainly anticipate that'll be approved, and we'll start that in the fall of 19. Finally, let me reiterate COA's gratitude for Currituck County's continuing support of higher education. When we opened the doors at the Rural Aviation and Technical Training Center in 2013, we had 95 students. This past year, we had 314 students. The majority of those were taking classes, though they were asking for classes, actually demanding classes, let's put it that way, not in technical programs, but in general education and transfer courses. For the current fall semester, the families of 240 students at J.P. Knapp and Currituck High School have saved $186,000 in tuition and fees by joining dual enrollment programs with COA. Let me tell you something. I don't know if everybody knows, but community colleges don't get to keep the tuition that we bring in. That money goes to Raleigh. So that's $186,000 that stayed here in Currituck instead of going to Raleigh to support the local economy. And that's just for the fall semester. That's not spring or summer. It seems clear to me that there's substantial demand for greater access to higher education in Currituck County, and COA is delighted to be a strong partner for you in meeting that demand, and we are truly excited about the additional space that will soon be available to support that mission. Thank you for your time and attention, and if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Just a comment from me. Clearly, we have the right person for the job.
Well, thank you very
for all
much.
you're
I
doing
appreciate that.
and really grow in the community college. I'm sure that's going to continue with the programs that are coming up in the near future. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Anyone else have a comment?
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Dr. Weininger.
Thank you.
Dr. Weininger was the only one I had signed up for public comment. Would anyone else like to speak during public comment this evening? With that, I'll close public comments. Moving on to Commissioner's Report. I've got a couple things this evening. First and foremost, I'm always raving about Currituck County employees, blah, 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 blah. I know. But it's true. And it isn't just the folks that are in the offices or that are sitting in these meetings. It's everybody in Currituck County. I had the privilege of loitering over at the municipal building for the last 2.5 weeks. And I got to tell you, the custodian over there, Dave Coltez, what an amazing guy. Always has a smile on his face, always doing something, always trying to greet people at the door, direct them where they need to go. And we have the cleanest bathrooms this side of I-95, I guarantee it. It's just one more indication of the great people that work in this county. And I just hats off to him. It was a pleasure getting to know him this week and talking to him. And, way back in the day, my drill instructor told me, told all of us at one time, he said, it doesn't really matter what you do in life, just be good at it. And that is very true of this man. And just wanted to let you know I appreciate that. Thank you for that. I had the opportunity to be at the 350th celebration this weekend. Barbara Snowden and her committee pulled it off. It was just an amazing event. Elaine Marshall gave a very inspiring speech with a great history about Currituck County. And Marguerite Etheridge just blew the doors off of singing there. It was truly amazing. If you get an opportunity, please participate in the 350th celebration. It's really neat. You learn a lot, and you meet some really neat people. And that's what I have this evening. And with that, I'll pass it on to Commissioner Hall.
Well, since I have some of our higher education folks sitting here, the word goodly is allowed to be used. It is part of our history. We learned that at the 350th anniversary.
Goodliest.
So, goodliest. So please, when your students use that, please don't mark them wrong. From that, I'll then transfer. I had a great time at the 350th. And since the next meeting is not scheduled till after the 11th, Veterans Day is coming up. I happen to be lucky enough to be the son of a sailor. Other parts of my family, the Army, the Navy also, the Marines, the Air Force, relatives from uncles, aunts, nieces, nephews. When it comes up on the 11th, folks, remember one thing. You slept well last night because these folks were out there stepping into harm's way so you could have the right to sleep safely, soundly, and tomorrow to go out and vote. So please, when they sit there and tell you, say, hey, thank you to these folks, don't just say thank you. Shake their hand, use their first name. Remember, they gave up a lot so we could have so much. Bob?
Thanks, sir. Commissioner White?
I guess I'm up. Last week I had the pleasure of going to the North Carolina Travel Industry Association's meeting with Ms. Kugler, and learned a couple things. We are still struggling with HB2. We're still a no-fly zone for several states, so they're constantly trying to overcome that negative imagery of North Carolina and get people here. And we are also still dealing with some after effects of the hurricanes and the bad weather we had this summer. There's still a little bit of a consensus out there that we are closed for business, and so they're working hard to combat that as well, to let people know that it was a small area that was affected, not the entirety of the state. we've got lots of areas to focus on for tourism other than our beaches. And Halloween last week, we had trunk or treat at the park in Corolla. It was unbelievable how many people turned out, got dressed up, and whether they had kids or not, people came out to do that. I know over 220 people signed up to go up into the lighthouse that evening, and I didn't go over there, and I know a lot of other people didn't go over there, so there had to have been well over 300 people up there at the park. I mean, it was unbelievable how the length that people went to set up out there and then break it back down and go home. I just brought a couple blow-up things and made it easy with the Honda generator, but other people went to great lengths. So if you're here in the county next year and you want someplace fun, entertaining, and safe to bring your kids, I would highly suggest that you come over there and participate. We had probably 40 people set up different little displays in there in the parking lot. So it's well worth your time and effort to come over there. It's a good time. That's it for me this evening. Thank you.
Commissioner Beaumont.
Yes, in the good news department, I have a letter of appreciation to read from the city of New Bern, North Carolina. And briefly, it goes on, Dear Chief Melton, please accept our heartfelt and sincerest appreciation for the support of Currituck County Fire Department during Hurricane Florence. One never quite knows what to expect during any hurricane, and Hurricane Florence was no exception. New Bern had not seen such destruction like this in quite some time, but this storm is definitely something from which we can all learn and grow. With that being said, words alone cannot simply express enough our gratitude to Currituck County Fire Department as well as the Currituck community for coming to our aid by supplying both manpower and an apparatus to help us during our time of need. We never would have anticipated having 3 of our own apparatus out of service during this event, only to find the cavalry coming to our aid. As a side note, one of the initial events that hit New Bern was a structure fire. They had 3 pieces of apparatus respond to that fire call, and by the time the fire was out, all 3 apparatus were underwater and were rendered unserviceable. And they were focused on the fire and got caught up by the flooding waters. Chief Melton, your crew of firefighters not only showed up prepared to help in any way possible, but they brought a lot of emotional support to our staff as well. We knew we would have had a lot of long days and nights ahead of us, and your department certainly lightened our load when we needed it most. Please accept my sincerest accolades and pass them on to Captain Sam Dahl, Ethan Toy, Adam Hans, Keith Storff, and Josh Morris for their true professionalism and stellar performance during Hurricane Florence. If there's anything we can do for Currituck County Fire Department, please do not hesitate to reach out to us. You certainly have many friends in New Bern. That's all I have.
Thank you. Commissioner Etheridge?
As was said, tomorrow's Election Day, and the polls are open from 6:30 a.m. to 7:30 p.m. Don't forget, on Election Day, you must vote at your polling place. And if you have any questions, you can call the Election Board office at 232-2525 or visit their webpage. Also, on October the 25th, I had the opportunity to attend the Health and Human Services Steering Committee meeting in Raleigh. Our committee deliberated and made recommendations on county legislative goal proposals concerning health and human services for all 100 counties. This month, I will be attending the Legislative Goal Committee, where we will review the goals set by 7 steering committees for our organization, the County Commissioners Association. After final approval, they will be presented to our legislators for their consideration next year. So I hope you realize that your vote is important, from your local county commissioners who make recommendations concerning agricultural, environment, safety, education, taxation, and human services, to your state representatives who consider which goals to embrace. Make sure you exercise a privilege that, as Mike said, people have fought for, and get out tomorrow and vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Etheridge, and thanks for serving on the state level and giving us a voice out there. Commissioner Gilbert?
I'll be brief tonight. this past weekend, there were two huge events for the Currituck kids, and it's a 501c organization, and we had the Gobbler Jogger, and I just want to thank the sponsors, the runners that came out for our 5K. We really exceeded our sponsorships this year, and I just want to thank each one of you that participated and was sponsored that program. And then we were the Currituck Kids was the recipient of the People's Choice Award at the 350th celebration, and that fundraiser brought in over $3,100 in a 3-hour period for the kids of Currituck. And keep in mind that all of that money is kept local, and it's given just to the kids in Currituck. So again, my heartfelt thank you to each and every one that participated and sponsored and contributed funds to those events. Just thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Gilbert. Commissioner Payment?
Well, I'm going to act as a sportscaster tonight. Currituck County this past week has got a lot to be proud of. Our students in multiple sports. First of all, I want to congratulate, if you haven't heard, I mean, I don't know where you were at, but our girls' high school volleyball team had an historical win. That was their first state title. And I went to a couple games. I saw Commissioner Beaumont there as well, but the atmosphere was so exciting. Those girls were so excited, and I know Currituck County and the schools just proud of what those girls accomplished, and just wanted to give them some accolades out there. And during that, Cameron Johnson, she was a tournament MVP, and then also Laura Griffin, she won the Sportsmanship Award for the tournament. 2 great awards for those. Shows some good class act for those girls out there. And also, we had a lot of other exciting things. I mean, the band, they won their competition. Yeah, I had to bring out the band. Yeah, that's band, man. But they had their award moments.
Yep.
The football team won last week, and there's a good possibility. I believe they're going to make the postseason coming up, and then the men's soccer team, they won. So I think tomorrow they're going to be in Roanoke Rapids. I know we got the superintendent here tonight, so if I've said something correctly, you can correct me later. But so, school activity is important for the students. It brings so much fun and involvement with the parents and the kids, and just it's a lot to be proud of. We've got a very good community, good school system, and just to see those kids' excitements for all this it's amazing, and it's great. I just wanted to bring that out there tonight. So if you can support, say hello, give them a good job, and if you can get involved with anything with the kids, I mean they're important to this community and need our support in every way possible. That's all I had tonight.
If I could,
Yes.
just as a kind of a tag team, evidently for the first time, I think Currituck actually hosted throughout the tournament until the states. And a group of parents approached our athletic director after the last win and basically said, because the community came out and supported the volleyball team, and they made the comment, because if you've never seen Sammy Walker, been at a sporting event where Sammy Walker's announcing, it's the real deal, right? And they made the comment, whatever you do, don't play Currituck at home. That was their takeaway.
Yeah. Sammy definitely makes it an experience. Thanks, guys. Moving on to administrative reports. We have the School Superintendent, Mark Stefanik, here to give us an update on the school district safety upgrades presentation.
Thank you, Chairman Hanning,
You're welcome.
Commissioners, Mr. Scanlon. Appreciate the opportunity to come tonight to talk about some safety upgrades that we took care of over this past summer. But let me give you a little history of how the process evolved. We put together a safety committee last spring, and Mr. Hall and Mr. Beaumont from this group represented the commissioners on that committee. And then we had 11 other folks, plus myself, on the safety committee to talk about what was already in place in the school district and some areas that we could go to enhance safety throughout our 10 schools. what we came up with 5 recommendations, and we thought that we could handle focusing on the top 3 as starting points, and then we'd look at numbers 4 and 5 at a later date. So the top 3 recommendations, first one was night lock devices, and out of respect, we've nicknamed those the Jenna locks because a former student board member, Jenna Akers, presented that device to our school board last spring along with now Sheriff Matt Bikert. And so she was integral in bringing that new device to our attention, and so we looked into it to see if it was something that we could put on virtually every door in all 10 schools, not just the classrooms, but offices, breakout rooms, what have you, so that in case of an emergency, we could pretty much put an additional door-based lock on every door in the school district. Second thing was door access controls. That's the keyless ID card entry system. And when we went through the process of looking at companies that install those, I believe we actually hired the company that took care of the courthouse here and possibly other county buildings. And so they're working on all the schools to get the keyless ID card entry system installed. We're at the point now where all we have to do is get all the ID cards, the pictures taken, and program the cards, and then we're ready to use the system throughout the district. And the last one is a work in progress, number 3, an SRO in every school. Again, this was the largest dollar amount in the request. What we put on there, we just put the personnel amount on there, but Sheriff Bikert said that there's upwards of another $250,000 in vehicles that would also accompany that almost $400,000 to get the 7 additional SROs. Numbers 4 and 5, window safety film treatment. This was something that came up in my email box while we were having the safety committee meetings, and so we just brought it to the safety committee's attention. It's something that we're going to look into. Apparently the 3M company creates a safety film that you can put over windows, and their claim is that when that's over the windows, it will stop a bullet coming through the glass and maintain the structure of the window. Now, again, that's a huge undertaking for all the windows that we have in the schools, but it's something that we can potentially look for in the future. And then metal detectors. We had a little bit of conversation about this. Metal detectors, how many, where do you place them, how do you direct all the folks to go through the metal detector to make sure that it's safe as possible. So that's why it's on the to be determined list, and it ended up in the 5 spot on our priority list right now. Also over the summer, the state put some competitive safety grants out to all the school districts. We attempted 3 safety grants, and I'm pleased to announce that we were awarded all 3 of them, and so that made me pleased. I had to go back into the email and make sure that they didn't just hand it out to everybody that applied, and they did not. They truly were competitive, and in some places, or some cases, they awarded like 85 out of maybe 110 applications along those routes, and we were awarded 1 in every category. So the first one is an SRO grant. We had one of these previously, so now we have a second one, and what that grant does is it provides funding for half of an SRO officer. So you can cut them up and down if you want. You can cut them at the waistline, whatever. We get half of the SRO covered through state funding, and then we utilized some federal funds and some local funds to pick up the other half. And now we're working on schedules with Sheriff Bikert to make sure that we have 4 SROs in the school district. So that will put an SRO in both middle schools and both high schools. Previous to this, we were sharing the high school SRO with NAP, and so now NAP will have its own SRO officer. School social worker, again, to work on family issues and students' mental health. The state had a school social worker grant out there. Previous to this, our social worker wore many hats, and so when we got this social worker grant, we were able to designate our social worker as strictly a social worker, and we were able to utilize state funding for that position. And the last one was a school equipment upgrades grant. and we designated the high school because there have been some concerns that possibly the camera system there doesn't cover all of the areas of the school, and so there might be some blind spots that we want to take care of, and we received that grant. And so I was informed today by Ms. Dowdy that not only will that enhance the high school's security camera system, but any cameras that receive an upgrade, those cameras that they're releasing from the high school system might still be of a higher grade than some cameras we have in some of the middle schools and the elementaries, so we'll repurpose those more effective cameras into the middle schools or the elementaries, depending on how many we have. So that grant will help out several buildings enhance their camera systems. Back in the spring when we were having the safety committee, a little bird told me that it might be possible that the commissioners may want to earmark some funds for some safety upgrades to the schools. But then I found out this fall that that doesn't happen without a formal request. And so what I did is I put out a formal request for a partnership, if you would like, on the Jenna lock system, because Jenna was one of our, born and raised students in the district. She was a student board member. She took it upon herself to research that safety system, and it is a safety system that will impact all 10 buildings in this district. So if the commissioners would like to partner with us on one of these initiatives, I did send to Mr. Scanlon a formal request for earmarked funds for that system if you so choose. Thank you for allowing me to present this update to you this evening. Now that the weather, we hope, has passed us by, as far as hurricanes and tropical storms go at least, before we get to the winter weather, we will be having a quarterly meeting set up with the safety committee, and we'll begin our conversations again on anything else we can do in the schools to keep our schools as safe as possible. One little footnote to Mr. Payment's volleyball announcement. Many people may not know this unless you followed the team closely. In the state tournament, the volleyball team went 18-0. They won every match. They won every match 3-0. So if you're talking about focus, you're talking about teamwork, and you're talking about seeing a goal all the way to the end, that's impressive to go undefeated in a state championship tournament. So just want to add that in. Very, very proud of that, the girls and the coaches on what they accomplished this fall.
If I could ask a question in reference to the SRO grant, you said half of an SRO for how long? Did they tell you that?
The last one that we have in place has been renewed every year. So our assumption is that once you get one, you have it. And so we've had the budgeting in place to take care of the other half. That would have been, I believe, the officer at the high school, and now this will be the second one. And there are some federal monies that we get that have parameters that are wide enough that you can put it towards safety and security, and so we can put some of those dollars toward this as well.
And it's the same thing with the social worker. You hope to be that's a renewal every year.
That's our hope. And I also heard today on another note that people are recommending even further investments into school support positions like nurses, counselors, school psychologists, and social workers. And so depending on what the General Assembly decides with the budget, there might be some more funding coming in those areas as well.
Mr. Stefani, did you say you'd already begun putting in the door access controls? Are you looking?
All the systems are in.
Oh, they are?
Yeah,
Okay.
we've got all of our buildings, including the central office buildings. They're locked down. They're buzzer accessible right now.
Right.
And then the only thing we don't have is we haven't gone to the ID cards instead of keys yet.
Okay.
But we're in the process of transitioning to that here this fall, early winter.
I can imagine having to rekey every year or so has got to be quite expensive.
Yeah. Well, and this isn't the only district that I've been in that has this. Keys float. And so, whether it be coaches or somebody that's signed out to use a building, on a Saturday or Sunday, it's been a very comfortable county, and it's a shame that we're moving out of that comfortableness, but you just can't give keys out to any and every community member that needs access to the schools. And so this system, what that'll do is it'll, anybody that has a spare key from a former use of a school building, that key won't be worth anything anymore. And so that'll just make it safer because we just have fewer keys out there in the district.
Well, Mr. Stefanik, thank you so much for really jumping on all the school safety issues. We all know how important it is.
Thank you.
One
Mr.
other-
Beaumont and can I finish?
Talk fast.
Mr. Beaumont, Mr. Hall, thank you for partnering with them and making this really move really quick. And I'm sure we'll be having that discussion about helping you fund that. Thank you.
Is it the Knox box?
Yes, the Knox box.
The fire department has formally requested that the schools install what's called a Knox box system. Are you familiar with that?
I think
So
I've
it's-
heard the term, but I don't know
It is
exactly
a
what it
controlled
is.
access to the school so that if a fire alarm goes off, school catches fire in the middle of the night, they can go and it tracks who opened the door and who got access, but it allows our firefighters to be able to get into the building and address concerns after hours.
A lot of businesses are using them right now.
Without having forced entry.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah, they don't have to break.
Otherwise, they break windows.
Right.
Okay.
They're very,
Very
reasonably
inexpensive.
priced.
Yeah.
But anyway, so if you could take that back to the board for consideration, I'd be like a hero to them.
Okay. I can put our maintenance director on researching it first thing in the morning.
Yep.
Okay.
Just takes one phone call.
Yep.
Just takes one phone call to, who is it? Who is it that they would call?
On the Knox box?
Yeah.
Probably Tim Riley be the best.
Yeah.
Who's the deputy chief,
Okay.
or Chief Milton.
All right. All right. Very good. Thanks again. Appreciate it.
I have one question. How much are the night lock devices individually for one?
Ooh.
Approximately, what do they run around $50?
Yeah, I think you could be safe to say that we put in at least 1,000. Yeah, so $50, $60 a lock, and that's installed. So whatever the labor cost on that is. Yeah.
Because I had mentioned to you, I don't know if you remember, maybe we could partner with the PTA or the Parents Association to sponsor, say, somebody want to give a lock in memory of somebody or honor of somebody. Is that something that could be done, coordinated with the?
Yeah, we can float it out there to the PTOs and the booster groups and see if they're willing to do that.
Because I certainly would love to sponsor one. I think a lot of people in the county to know that it's keeping our children safe would be more than willing to do that.
Okay.
I do have one question. Are we doing any type of continuing education with staff as far as common sense safety practices, like don't prop open the gym door because it's hot in there
Yes.
type thing?
Yes. Yeah.
I'm not saying that happened here. I'm just asking that question because,
Yes, those are part of early in the year staff meetings and then reminders. As a former elementary teacher and elementary principal, recess rocks.
Right.
That's a
Right.
big thing in the elementary. Put a rock in the door so it doesn't close, and you don't have to take your keys with you out to recess duty. I mean, that's and all those things, and that's what any safety security expert will tell you. It doesn't matter what you've done. You leave one door propped open, and all your plans go right up in smoke.
Right.
And so we've got to just tell folks again, this community has been a very tight knit community, for decades and decades. But society, sadly enough, has changed, and so we've got to make sure that just things stay locked and we keep everybody protected behind lock and key during the school days.
Thank you, Mr. Stefanik.
Okay, thanks again.
Moving on to public hearings, first one would be PB 18-22 Allied Properties LLC, request for conditional rezoning of 66.8 acres from conditional district mixed residential to conditional district mixed residential to change the conceptual development plan and conditions on properties located in Moyock on the east side of Currituck Highway, tax map 9, parcels 11L and 6A, tax map 9H, parcels OSA-OSC, parcels 1-12 and parcels 42-58, Melyock Township. And with that, I'll hand it over to Ms. LaCicero.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The conditional rezoning before you tonight, it is off of Baxter Lane. It was a little odd bit there with the conditional mixed-use residential. They're changing the development plan and the conditions that go along with that. So it's not we're not going from one zoning district to another, but they've changed the plan, the development plan that's associated with the conditional use. This is the aerial photo of the area under question. It is conditional mixed use, surrounded by ag on most sides, a little bit of business, GB here in the front, and a little bit of HI here in the back, heavy industrial. It is in full service in the Melyock Small Area Plan. In 2015, the applicant was approved for development plan for 59 residential lots. This is the original layout. For a small commercial area, and this area here that's been designated future development. Since 2015, Windswept Pines has been designed and developed. Phase 1 has been recorded, and there are currently several homes under construction in this development. With the construction drawing application, stormwater plans were revised that resulted in needing additional storage for the stormwater in this area, and I think the applicant's engineer is probably going to speak more to the details of that later in the presentation. So the new plan has, in the area of future development, has been reduced, and two new stormwater retention areas have been designated in this with the revised plan. It also modifies the open space a little bit. You can see there was a detention pond here, and in the new one, the detention pond's not here. These have changed just a little bit, and there's also a shift in the road as well. Because of these changes, they had to bring back a new application and a new conceptual design before the board for approval. The total area is 66.87 acres, 59 residential lots, and 1 commercial area. They are not changing the number of lots in the existing approval. Open space is 15.39 acres required for the residential and 0.14 acres required for the commercial. They have provided 17.07 acres for the residential and 0.15 acres for the commercial. The open space that they provided does not include this area set aside for future development. Their existing zoning conditions, the proposed use is a subdivision, and that all lots will be greater than or equal to 20,000 square feet. Another condition would be to install a new culvert under the Baxter's Lane to improve off-site drainage, signed to be determined after engineering evaluation. Perform an evaluation of existing main ditch along the True Ann Ward property line from site to Baxter's Lane, and if warranted, seek permission to improve ditch cross-section. The 5th existing condition is to explore the possibility of routing a portion of stormwater runoff to the northeast. And the 6th existing condition is all residential development will be single-family and conform to the sample building elevations provided. Now, with this new development or new proposed conceptual plan, the applicant is proposing to remove the 4th condition about the evaluation of the True Ann Ward ditch, and the applicants can speak to that in just a moment. So TR, the Technical Review Committee and the Planning Board both recommend approval of this new conceptual plan with the new zoning conditions of, I'll go through those, the proposed use of a subdivision, and that all lots will be greater than or equal to 20,000 square feet, that the new culvert will be installed under Baxter's Lane to improve the off-site drainage to be determined after an engineering evaluation, exploring the possibility of routing a portion of the stormwater runoff to the northeast, and that all residential development will be single-family and conform to sample building elevations provided. So the land use policies that support this is that is policy H1N1 from the 2006 Land Use Plan, that Currituck County shall encourage development to occur at densities appropriate for the location, and also the Moyoc Small Area Plan, policy FLU1 is full service, which is full service designations range from 1.5 to 3 units per acre. This falls in that category, and that policy is to promote compatibility between development and existing development to avoid adverse impacts to the existing community. And that's my presentation to the board about this, and I'll be pleased to take any questions from the board.
Question, why are they changing this?
When they went in for construction drawings, and the applicant can probably give you better detail about this, they needed more storage for their stormwater. They just needed more capacity due to their calculations for the area that they're developing. And I think Mr. Bissell is going to be speaking to exactly how he got to this, that he needed more surface area for water.
Okay.
So you asked that we hold off on this stormwater storage and direction till he gets here?
Yes, he'll probably speak to this in just a moment.
Okay.
Ms. Cicero, the installing a new culvert under Baxter Lane, it seems like we talk about this all the time. Is that something they can actually do? Or did I read that DOT had replaced that at some point?
I'm not sure. I need to investigate that.
It said that it had been replaced, but that there's a dip where the asphalt was replaced, and that needs to be fixed by DOT.
Okay.
Last month, they were doing some major work down there in Baxter Road.
Any further questions for Ms. LaCicero? If the applicant could come forward, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome, sir.
Well, the request is really all about stormwater, so I prepared some slides to go through to kind of help you see what the drainage patterns are in the area, what the pre-development runoff conditions were, what the post-development conditions are that are being proposed, and just to try to help everybody understand what we're doing and why. As Ms. LaCicero said, the proposal is really just to add additional stormwater storage to improve the drainage. We're not adding lots or roads or anything else. It's just to make the stormwater work better. What you're looking at on this slide is a kind of northeastern regional development or drainage scenario. The areas that are highlighted in the various colors are drainage basins that are on the west side of 168, all of which drain through DOT pipes under 168 onto properties on the east side of 168 and eventually out farther east. The area that you see in yellow is about 212 acres that all drain through where you see this highlighted yellow culvert here, a 54-inch pipe, and that drainage drains along the north property line of the subject property along a common ditch with the Kemp property. Historically, that came about halfway across this property, then turned to the south through a north-south farm ditch, and originally it went straight to Baxter Lane through here. This parcel is property that's owned by Mr. Truran. It's a 10-acre lot, and that ditch was filled in. You can see kind of a vestige of it in the aerial. But when that property was developed, this ditch turned 90 degrees to the east, then went down a common property line ditch here, then turned back to the west, and then went through a pipe under Baxter Lane. So not a very efficient drainage system. And that's why we agreed to a couple of the conditions in the original rezoning case, which were to put a new to study putting a new culvert under Baxter Lane, and originally it was to study this particular ditch, but as we studied it and as we studied it with the county engineering staff and so forth, it made sense to not try to route all this runoff from this 200 acres through the middle of the development and route it through our stormwater ponds. There's a more efficient way to get that water to the Baxter Lane ditch, and so what we actually did, let's I'm going to get a little bit ahead of us here, but this is the we constructed a new ditch that runs right along here between or just to the
We can't
see
your
what you're
cursor.
pointing at.
We don't see your cursor.
We don't know where here is at up there.
All right.
Okay.
We're doing this number right here.
They don't see this. Okay.
You got to step back. You got to come up here and start pointing.
So if we look lost, that's,
No, we can't see that one either.
we still can't see that, Mark.
Get it?
Can you see it? Yeah, they can't see
No, you got to come to this side.
Over
Wrong
this side.
TV. Mark, Mark,
Come on in front of the podium.
Oh,
Yeah.
No man's land up here in the middle.
Yeah, yeah.
there.
There you go.
All right.
Welcome to the ring.
Everybody, come on
All right.
out.
here this is a new ditch that has been constructed with a pipe that runs under, actually there are 3 pipes that were constructed under Baxter right at this location. This is a 54-inch pipe coming under here, under 168. And the calculations show that a 60, just a little bit bigger pipe, a 60-inch would be required here. There wasn't headroom, so there were actually 3 36-inch pipes, which are the equivalent of the 60 that were run under Baxter at that location. And somebody mentioned earlier there was a dip there where that wasn't properly compacted, and I understand that it just recently been repaired. So eventually then, the water runs down Baxter. There's a 90-degree turn here at the Baxter Lane extension. There was a pipe there that collapsed and it's backing water up in here, which was replaced a month or so ago.
I think that's the one. That's the one that has the dip. I think the one that NCDOT replaced.
The one further down the line.
But the one down here
Yeah,
has a dip.
that's a DOT
There was
issue.
a dip here also, which maybe we both had dips.
Was this pipe originally something, and maybe I'm getting your neighbors confused, that we had to also get special permission because of the railroad tracks or something? Is that a different neighborhood?
That was a water line.
Water line, okay.
Right, that was a water line that extended
And then also can you tell me
from 168 to the property.
which ditch is the Tehran and Ward property line? Because I know in the previous one, we talked about at one time forming an evaluation of the existing main ditch. And that was
Right.
scratched through. Is that something that has been improved now because of the other ditches you put in?
Right, so most of the water that used to flow into that ditch has now been routed around to that ditch and no longer utilizes that ditch. Improving that ditch would have involved getting permission from 2 private property owners. And if you look at the ditch that we actually ended up constructing on this property, it's a ditch that has probably a 15 to 20 foot bottom width, and it's a very substantial ditch. And doing that on private property was not as good a solution as what we came up with. So we satisfied that condition in a different way. This second slide is actually showing the pre-development drainage patterns on the site. The area that you see in pink actually also originally all flowed through through the Truran ditch. The Truran Ward ditch is now the Truran Johnson ditch. You can see a relatively small area in blue that actually flows through a ditch that runs along the south property line to the east. And there's an area in tan color that flows through the north property line ditch to the east also and out to the northeast. This area in green actually flowed south directly to Baxter Lane. And there's a little tiny area at the north that's in a kind of a teal color, that area number 6. You see an arrow there that flows. It's just really just a narrow strip between two existing ditches that flowed into that north property line ditch. What you see on this slide then is the post-development on-site drainage map, delineation map. And the way these two maps work together is this map actually dictates how much water can be put into existing ditches. We've done a topographic survey and studied the ditches, cross-sectioned the ditches, and then done a model. And that model, which is done under the UDO requirements, that assumes that all this land is wooded, and you're allowed to actually discharge what you would expect to, and what the model shows will discharge from the site through a 2-year storm event in a wooded condition site, which is a very small amount of water. For example, this kind of bluish lavender area has an existing runoff under those conditions of just over 1 cubic foot per second. The tan area about 3.5 cubic feet per second. So that establishes how much water we can send through those ditches post-development. Now when you look at the development patterns post-development, this area that is in yellow, which formerly went to the Baxter Lane ditch via the Truran Ward ditch, now bypasses that Truran Ward ditch and goes directly via the new pipes that we've just installed under Baxter Lane. The blue area, which again we're limited to just over 1 cubic foot per second of discharge, will be going to the ditch to the east along the south property line. Maybe I should use this cursor. So this area is going to go through this ditch. This pond that we're proposing to build here.
For the folks on the other side.
That pond is there to store the difference between that 1 CFS that's going to go into this ditch and the water that's coming off of these lots and roads. So that's the reason we need that pond. Similarly up here, and one of the conditions was to sending some of the water to the northeast. And we were able to determine that about 3.5 cubic feet per second goes to the northeast, and that's what we've been allowed to do. So this pond will store the difference between that 3.5 CFS and the actual water coming out of these lots post-development in a 10-year storm. So that's the reason for the amendment. We don't really know until we have studied the groundwater, done the topographic survey, studied the existing ditches, and done the actual stormwater modeling, and to know exactly how big these ponds are going to be, how much water do we actually need to store on site, and how much can we release. And that's the reason for this request. We need those 2 additional ponds to limit this runoff to those ditches, to those pre-development conditions.
So basically, you're getting more water more runoff than you anticipated. That's why you need the ponds.
Or have a higher water table than we anticipated.
Okay.
So when you have a high, and then the water table does actually rise as you go to the east. So if you have less vertical room to work with, you need more horizontal room to be able to store that same amount of water.
And if need be, you're able to make those two ponds even bigger than you're showing on the map, if need be.
Yeah, they're tapped out.
For future development, yes.
Right.
So in this slide, yes,
So I'm sorry, just for clarity. So the ponds are going to increase holding capacity on site, which is good.
which is good.
Okay, we like good. That's all I need to know.
Now, when you dig the ponds, are you intending to keep the soil on site and just raise the topography a little bit, or?
Yes, we'll utilize the soil that comes out of those ponds to fill the lots and to build the streets and so forth.
And the lime green on the far back that's wetlands?
That's still future development.
Future development, okay.
We do anticipate coming back at some point with additional lots developed in a similar manner. We would need additional ponds for those lots or to enlarge the ponds we're showing here in order to accommodate any additional development back there. We're not proposing that now because we have not yet finished with the Corps of Engineers on a wetland delineation of that area.
So how did you figure this out? Were you having issues that caused you to say, hey, we need a bigger pond, or we need to make this pond? What prompted this change?
Well, it was the results of the actual stormwater modeling.
Okay, the modeling is what changed it. Okay. Any more questions for?
I just want to know where you got the tie from. That's better than my tie.
Okay. Hearing no further questions, thank you.
Just important for everybody to get out the vote, right?
Exactly.
Right. Yeah. Yes, sir.
I have a question. I'm Mr. Trump, and
Come on up, sir.
my name's Richard Stroh, and I address all of you, and I give you respect. He keeps mentioning about putting in a culvert or something, and he hasn't shown me where he's going to put this culvert at. And I would like to know whether, he went so fast and you couldn't see his little arrow thing, whether the water from these ponds is going to run across my land, because I don't want it. See, the problem that he has is with he put 3 culvert pipes up there where they keep talking about the speed bumps. And when you get 3 inches of rain, the ponds that he has on his land now cannot hold the water. It runs down there. It goes on the other side of Baxter Lane, where you got that ditch that goes the whole way down the road, and it just basically backs up. And when the water backs up in that ditch, it comes on my land and it comes on his land. The water runoff is now backing up on our land. You get 3 inches of rain, I got the water coming up on my land. It's already come up to the house, where it hasn't come right to the house, but the ponds isn't big enough to hold the water, so then it goes through the new drainage system that he's put. Yes, he's rerouted all the land, all the water, but when it goes through that drainage systems and the 3 culvert pipes to get on the other side of the Baxter Lane, when it gets in that ditch, I've been telling them, all the ditches is backed up. The water has nowhere to go. It even goes up on the farmer's field on the other side of the road, and then it just starts back. My land is getting flooded because of a backwashing from the water.
Mr. Bissell, can you address that question?
I would like to know, when he keeps talking about putting a culvert in, is that culvert going to be on my land? Is it going to be down at the end of my road? I don't know. You haven't showed it yet.
Where is your property?
Where's your property, sir?
I don't. I can point to it, but I have nothing to show you.
Point to it, sir, and then I'll relay the information there. Where's your property at?
Okay, he's got,
He's right there in the left corner.
what he's got this junk. Oh, where am I at?
It's
I'm
easier
right
to see
there.
on here.
I'm right there.
So, it's this property right
Yes.
Okay.
And what I'm also talking about is his drainage. Can you point to this? His drainage system that comes down here.
So your whole property floods, or the back half or the front half?
It's getting the back wash because when his water, okay, can you point to this? When his water flows down down his drainage system, it comes down here, and then it goes on the other side of Baxter Lane. When's it? You go. Yeah, it comes down here and it goes on the other side of the Baxter Lane, and it runs down that ditch, and that ditch it just can't take the water out. And when it can't take the water out, guess what? All these properties, the whole way down here on Baxter Lane, is getting a backwash from his water because he's elevated that land and don't have enough drainage in those ponds, and it's coming up on our land.
Okay,
I think
let me ask you, Mr. Bissell, real quick. Have you dug ponds yet?
We have. We dug 3.
Okay.
Those first 3 are done.
I mean, he's did a great job so far, but he hasn't solved the problem. That's
Well,
what I'm trying to tell you.
Well, if we could go back to this
I told
slide.
you from the very beginning that that this wasn't going to work, and you wouldn't listen.
Well, you see, before we started the development, this 212 acres worth of land that you see in yellow, all the runoff from that land and all the runoff that you see here in pink went through this ditch that runs along the side of Mr. Shuran's property. All that water ran right through here.
And how was drainage?
Through this pipe.
Was it draining at that time bad?
But you've also elevated all that land back there, probably up about that high, and now the water, instead of it being on the land, now it's elevated up so high, you've actually created a bigger problem because the water got to get. When you keep talking about putting some type of culvert or drainage ditch
Mr.
on my
Bissell.
land, where are you going to put that at?
Okay, if I can interject for just a second. So part of the problem we have is water's coming from the other side of 168 into this, which you're trying to mitigate some of that by rerouting it around the property and change how it flows.
Right.
And then,
now the same water all still flows.
right, so we're still getting the same water, but right. And is it safe to say at this point, though, what you've excavated for your ponds, you have not, you haven't put your system in place yet to move this water into these retention ponds, or have you?
The first phase, the first half of the project is developed. And
Okay. Okay. And it is coming onto his property.
But is the purpose of that pond to relieve that pressure? The pond you want to build?
These 3 ponds is to relieve the runoff from what's
This
happening
area.
on site.
So what,
Right.
what you're saying is the previous site before you developed was hold the water.
And now
it
it's not.
wasn't creating just a problem.
But when the ponds get filled up, the water starts going down his drainage system, goes on the other side of 168, and we have a backlash coming up on our land because now we have more water, and it's just coming up and flooding us. The problem has actually got worse.
Well, there was a problem, and I think what you're talking, the reason your problem you think got worse, and it probably did for a while, was that this pipe that's farther downstream had actually collapsed on Baxter Extension.
That's all the way down the end of the road.
Right.
Yes, sir. I've been down there to look at it.
Sorry,
There we go. So where was that pipe at that would collapse, Mark?
That pipe is right here.
Well, yeah, but it's
All the water that we were looking at from the other side of 168 and all the water from this property as well as from the Kemp property and from these lots, all of that water Here, see that pipe right there?
Since the pipe has been put in, the water is still backing
And that
up.
collapsed.
Yes.
And about a month or so ago, that was replaced.
That's been replaced probably about 2 months ago. And since the water's been put in, since the pipe's been put in, the water's still backing up because when that drainage ditch can only handle so much water, and when it reaches the other end, I mean, it keeps talking about a pipe, but once on the other side of the pipe is private property, and he can't get back there to redig that ditch.
Sir, before the development started,
Yes.
did you have a problem with your property with drainage?
We had some problems, but now when we get a little bit of rain, the problem's worse because you got the backlash coming up. The only time I had problems on my property was when a hurricane comes in. Now you get 3-4 inches of rain, I got water coming up on my land.
Okay, so in your property, is it coming in from Baxter Lane or from behind, in the back of your property? Where's the water coming now?
Is flowing, my ditches on my land that should be flowing down has got the water from his land that's coming up.
I might be able to add just a little bit to this.
Come on up, sir. Join the party.
I still would like to know what you keep talking about a culvert on my land. Or when you put these new ponds in, is any of that water going to run on my land?
No.
Okay. What do you keep talking about putting in a culvert on Mr. Truman's land about?
No, that was to evaluate your ditch on your land.
Okay. So you
What we
mean,
did was we took the water out of your ditch.
yeah, but now you got the water that you
No, they're just
rerouted, flowing
testifying.
on the other
They're
side and
testifying.
coming up on
It's
my
fine.
land because it's
It's
coming
legal.
back.
And
We're good.
I think that's
Who are you, sir?
My name is Nathan Morales. We live a couple
you,
houses
Nathan.
down from Mr. Truant. What I have seen since the development has happened, and I think Mr. Bissell just said that where they penetrated Baxter Lane to get into the farm ditch would have normally required a 60-inch pipe. And to do the math and get that volume flowing, they did 3 36-inch pipes.
Right.
Those 3 36-inch pipes flow into a ditch that's about 2 feet by 3 feet. It's not got the capacity that the pipes put into the ditch on the opposite side of the street. And so what happens when that water does start flowing, and because it is several hundred acres that come through those 3 pipes, as it flows east down Baxter Lane, it actually back channels under Baxter Lane toward the north. And it floods our properties on the north side of Baxter Lane because the ditch can't handle the capacity that's been injected into it. Before, when it rained, it slowly made its way out. And that was fine. And now we've had some rain events the last couple weeks, and they've been minor, and the ditches haven't flowed at all on our side. But what happens when those ditches reach capacity, when they hit that 10-year mark, and that water starts flowing under Baxter Lane, it back feeds to the east, north, back under Baxter Lane, and starts to infiltrate property that I don't know that you expected that would be a negative repercussion of this. And maybe you did. I don't know how the engineering works on that. But water's going to seek that level point, and right now, because it's got less capacity on the south side of Baxter Lane, it goes north under Baxter Lane onto the private properties that are just south of the green area now, and it infiltrates the ditches that are meant to drain a little 3-acre lot. It's not flowing in, and I get it. We want to have houses. I'm with it. But if we're going to run all that water down the south side of Baxter Lane, we need to fix that ditch. And I understand it's not the county's ditch, but it's impacting the county road. It's impacting the people that live along that path. I don't know what the answer is, and the pipe may help it now that's been repaired down at the bend in the road. But you can open up as big a pipe as you want to, but if you clog the ditch up, the water's not moving any faster than the ditch's capacity will allow.
Well, I know you spoke up at the community meeting.
I did.
And at that community meeting, that pipe had not been fixed downstream then, where that Baxter extension pipe collapsed. So I was assuming that you were getting water was backing up because there was really no place for it to go down.
Mr. Bissell?
So,
Okay, the 336-inch pipes, are those DOT?
yes.
So they put in, and I get it, right? You're trying to fit a semi-tractor
Well,
trailer through a
Not only
Volkswagen
that, but
size,
if
right?
you look at the way that the property would have flowed originally, that water would have entered the ditch at various points in the ditch's cycle. Now it's all moving to the north and then got to flow the entire length of Baxter Lane. It moves the water that would have been several hundred yards to the east back to the west and then south and back to the east. So it's all got to traverse Baxter
But
Lane,
you
and
still,
that ditch can't handle
your
it.
constraint is still down at the tail end of that ditch line.
I believe that the constraint is the ditch itself.
Well, that's what I'm saying, is that
All of that 212 acres worth of water came through this ditch and under this pipe right here before. Now it comes through this pipe. So there's a few hundred feet of Baxter Lane that has more water in it upstream of where you are than it was before. But downstream where you are, it's the same water.
but
Once
you can't put a flapper valve on it, can you? A gate
Keep it from back.
or DOT won't.
Put a gate valve under the road?
And I hear what he's saying, back of the Baxter Lane ditch, and it has been improved in part by the farmer.
Let him speak, sir.
Property.
Just let him speak. We know you want to. We know you want to talk.
From the very beginning, I've been fighting this because I knew that it would not work, and what you have all allowed is to build a property that has a drainage system that has water nowhere to go once the pond is filled up. But to come up on our property lands, even the septic system's up there now. Even he said his septic system's kind of getting messed up because the water's coming up to where the septic system is. You have allowed this building to go on and on and on, and he still wants to do more building. And once that water hits that ditch on the other side of Baxter Lane, when his ponds overflows, has nowhere to go but the backwash and hit us.
And whatever water would have normally stood where these houses are now, or been trapped in there, being as it's built up, is pushed off onto the adjacent lots as well. And there's a code to this. I get it. But half the problem.
Hold on, guys. We're getting a little bit out of control. If we can have, sir, if you can stay, you, sir, with the hat on, yes, sir. If you can stay on up here, and Mr. Bissell, if you can speak, that would be great. So what do you say to the fact that the water that's coming off of the property you're developing is going onto their land, and how do we solve that issue?
Well, the water that's coming off of our property is coming off at a rate that is less than what it came off of before, because we're holding it in these ponds and slow releasing it. Now the water that's coming from the northwest off of these 212 acres is still coming to Baxter Lane and still going into the same ditch it went to before. Our development is based on holding the difference between the 10-year post-development runoff and the 2-year wooded condition runoff, which is a small amount of water that's going into each of these ditches. Does that make sense?
It does.
And so the ponds fill up, then they discharge through an outlet structure over a period of hours after the storm. So it's actually reducing what you're seeing in this property line ditches and in the Baxter ditch compared to the way it was before development.
But that's not what they're saying is happening, right?
I would disagree with that. In theory, I get it, because you've stored a certain amount of water that isn't moving. But once it starts moving, it's like breaking open the dam and saying less water got out than before, but the dam just broke. And so it all came at once. That's the issue. It's not that it doesn't recover. It's not that the ditch won't take it away. Eventually it will. But it's the volume of water that rushes once this whole system starts to feed into and under Baxter Lane that causes these problems.
So,
And
so
you
those
said-
will actually handle about 6 inches of runoff. That's fine.
And you
Before
said
they
that the
overflow.
water table to the east was higher generally than you expected it to be, and that's one of the things that have caused you to dig a larger pond, if I'm not mistaken. Is that part of it?
I didn't say it was higher than we expected it to be. I just said it's higher than.
Okay.
than
So it's
the
higher.
west.
So the water table where I am is already higher than where they've already done this. And what these ponds are doing, and I'm not an engineer, I understand what happens when I pour water on the ground and when it infiltrates into the ground. When you start cramming water into the ground, it puts pressure on any area around it that's got free storage capacity. And the free storage capacity that it's putting pressure on right now, I believe, is my septic tank. On more than one occasion, when we've had high volume rains, I have stood in my front yard and watched a slow trickle of water come out of our septic tank.
And if
That's not something that ever.
Have you ever seen it before?
I had not. Had not. And I understand at this point there wasn't a study beforehand, there wasn't a study after. We moved in February of 2017, so it could have been an existing condition that I wasn't aware of. But it was something that became very alarming, because now toilets don't flush the way that they should. We're trying to figure out with the health department what we're going to have to do, and it's, I think, a result of the overwhelming pressure that we're putting on the water table through retention ponds, through additional development, all of those things. Every bit of water that goes into the earth is going somewhere, and it's going somewhere slowly. and some of those places are into my septic tank. I don't know
Your
how
theory
to
is that that the water in the stormwater ponds on the site is raising up the groundwater on your site, but from an engineering and a hydrology standpoint, it doesn't really work like that, because the water is coming up in these ponds for a very short period of time. It's coming up a couple of feet and then it's draining right back down. Those ponds are basically just a window to the water table.
But it's holding the water table at an elevated level.
No, it's keeping the water table where it was. It's raising it up briefly so that we can reduce the amount of runoff that's going into the ditches. Over a period of hours, it settles right back to where it was.
This is what I'm saying. It doesn't trickle out of my septic tank constantly. It trickles after the rain stops, and this pressure that you're talking about is being relieved in these ponds. And I'm not an engineer. I don't do load calcs. I understand a certain amount of this from being in a contracting trade and working with earth, but this
Typically,
is
a pond like that will only influence an area a couple hundred feet away, and if there's a ditch in between that pond and you, that ditch will actually control the head of that water table.
If that ditch pierces the clay layer, sure. The ditches that we're talking about, I don't believe pierce the clay layer, or they're clogged with sediment. But if I take my excavator into my backyard and I dig a hole vertically to that sand layer, the water will fill up into the clay at least 18 inches. And that's where my septic lines sit. That's water that I understand is there, and I'm not saying you put it there, and I'm not trying to lay this at anybody's feet, dude. I'm in business. I get it. You build houses, and you want to build houses, I'm with it. Let's build houses. But some of the unintended consequences are having real effects on people that surround us. And I know from being where I am, I have neighbors that are so frustrated they won't even come up here. People that are just fed up with it, who are looking to sell their house because they didn't expect any of this stuff to happen.
Now, I could see that because of the collapsed pipe that happened down in our Baxter extension, and that water backing up, that could affect your septic system.
I don't disagree. Mm-hmm. But the whole system, if the water in the ditch can affect it, I don't understand how the water a couple hundred yards away in the pond can't.
Okay.
And we're not here to debate that.
Yeah,
I appreciate what you guys are doing.
No. Probably at this point, I have no idea what to do.
What we're really trying to do is decide whether more ponds is better than less ponds.
Right. I get that. I get that part, but we probably need something to substantiate what you're saying to satisfy this gentleman and the gentleman behind you. Would be probably the right thing to do at this point. If if anything that is causing him an issue that he didn't have in the past, then that's not the right thing to do. So, how would we get to the point where someone could substantiate what Mr. Bissell was saying before we move forward? Right. Jason, are you prepared to talk to that or no?
Send Eric.
Oh, Eric's there?
Bring in Eric.
I'm sorry, I didn't see Eric.
Give me the right hand for the bullpen.
Yep. Yep.
I believe we have a downstream problem. The ditch downstream is too small. And I think these gentlemen agree. When they put in those 3 36-inch culverts, they redirected the water. So they brought more water up on the western end of that Baxter ditch, and it's overwhelming it. And now it's backing up on these gentlemen's property. The solution is clean that downstream ditch. And that's where we struggle.
And how do we do that?
Land.
So until that's done, this can be a continuous problem for them.
Mr. Truan, do you agree with that? That ditch along that farm,
I don't know if that's going to solve the problem. All I know is he's got water everywhere.
It certainly wouldn't hurt.
Wouldn't hurt.
The other thing, and I don't know who's
Come up to the podium if you're going to speak.
I want to make sure I understand Mr. Truan, because he's always had this issue. And we felt that when we built that subdivision, it would take the water off of you and redirect it through that new big ditch. But the problem is where it goes underneath the road, that ditch along that farm on the south side of the road is too small. And it's backing up in your land.
And the farmer's field over there, not only does the water flow up in the ditch, but the water's, I've seen it up in the farmer's field where it's all in the farmer's field, and then it comes up on my land. I said, honey, this is crazy. I said, we've had 4 inches of rain, and now I got the water up in my house.
Now, once it gets past those fields and it gets into there's a row of houses along the south side of Baxter. Their driveway culverts are 60-inch culverts. Once it gets there, it's okay. And then you get down to the end of Baxter Lane, that new culvert they put in is a 36-inch. So it's undersized.
Good grief.
And then once it gets under through that, it goes into a swamp that hadn't been cleaned out forever, and that needs to be opened up. So it's a downstream problem.
So we got 3 36-inch pipes feeding ultimately through a single 36-inch pipe.
And if the state doesn't do anything.
And the ditch that's downstream, it's not like a big ditch. It's like a wee little ditch. So, the ditch starts out where it's all clogged up, and then by the time we get down to the bottom, it's like just a little small ditch, man.
So the subdivision drains great.
No, I don't disagree.
The subdivision works good.
Okay, let's call it a night.
Mr. Weatherly, how
it
much?
isn't the subdivision; it's what's happening downstream. So, how do we correct what's happening downstream?
And that's what I was going to ask. How much? What's the length that needs to be cleared? What
you see on the south of Baxter Lane? You see that field, and then where the houses start, it's that section of field.
So it's just that.
Well, then we got the culvert as an issue further downstream.
At the curve there, but that's on private land. That wasn't a DOT culvert. DOT ends at the end of the pavement, which is just before the curve. So the citizens had to put that in. That little group of houses there just past the curve, they anteed up and paid for that.
So we're relying on drainage to private property that we have no control over.
Correct.
And we're pouring that water into that.
So, how do we resolve that issue? How do we resolve that issue?
Dig a big ditch in the county easement just south of Baxter Lane.
Go ahead, Eric. You can say it.
The county, okay, so the county doesn't do drainage on private land. The only way we can address drainage problems is through stormwater districts.
And that's not it.
That's not in a district.
Not in this, yeah. So we have no control of that. It is what it is.
Well, we have civil actions that property owners take against each other, and that's.
But you're saying the issue that they're experiencing isn't from this property that he's developing.
Yes, it is.
It's where it releases. And they only have to hold a 6-inch rain. They'll hold a 6-inch rain and release it slowly. But we've had some major storms. And it seems like we have repeated 100-year storms.
The ponds will not hold.
And these gentlemen have been witnessing that. Well,
I'm living there. I've seen it. I mean, 6 inches of rain, I almost got the water
so
up in my garage.
probably what's happening is you're getting multiple small rains, and it doesn't release fast enough before the next rain comes.
That was the one thing that I noticed in that modeling system of the 10-year floods or 10-year rains, is that that's great for an isolated event, but when we get event after event after event after event, and going back to it, at the end of the day, it's a flow problem. You've got 3 36-inch culverts feeding a 2-foot wide ditch that's not deep enough or wide enough, and until that moves out of there, any successful rain has nowhere to go. But we, the county, can't dig ditches.
Well, we can't tell the private citizens to increase their culvert because they don't have to.
So,
But we, the county, can pour 212 acres of water directly into that ditch.
the county didn't do that.
DOT put it.
That's DOT.
Put us through culverts in.
We have no control over culverts. We have no control over roads. And we have, unless there's a district, we have no control over ditches.
A lot of developments, when they develop like that, they dig their ponds big enough where the water from the element goes into the pond. It doesn't have to come out and affect the neighbors.
All ponds are going to gum out sooner or later.
Somewhere. Yeah, they're coming out somewhere.
So you can't build a big enough pond to hold water forever.
Have a pond big enough to hold their stuff. So it seems like it just kind of is what it is. So let's build another 30 houses, put in 2 more big ponds.
Well, again, the ponds may offer some help.
Sounds like to me whether the ponds are there or not, but those 3 culverts, it's gonna, when it rains, it's gonna.
The rain has been ridiculous.
I agree.
Well, the other problem is it seems like we need a stormwater district in this area so that we can hopefully help give some relief to the citizens of this area, residents of this area, but they have to be willing to participate.
If that ditch is on private property, we can't touch it.
Right. Well,
No, you still would
Have to
need
get-
an
we still have to
easement
get
from
from-
the property
right,
owners, or you'd
an
have to
easement.
consider eminent domain.
which if it's hurting some cropland over there or destroying crops, the farmer may be willing to grant
It's the
us.
farmer's ditch.
Right. He may be willing to grant us permission to help fix his ditch.
No, he's already.
Well, it's really a DOT ditch, but I believe it's on the farmer's property. So I don't know if we could talk to DOT about improving it, but I kind of know that answer.
At our last ARPO meeting, language was put into the request for the legislator to approve that it specifically called out ditch maintenance and improvement rather than just strict maintenance costs. And that was done specifically by Division 1, which Currituck falls in, because there is no call out or emphasis on ditch clean out and maintenance by NCDOT. So we actually asked that language be added for the specific purpose of being able to start putting more funding. Yes, sir.
The ditch on the other side of the road that you all talked about has already been cleared out once. It's been about 20 years ago. It took my wife 5 years of fighting this county to get them down there, to come down there with the scoops and to get it fine and to get it cleaned out.
It was not the county.
It was not the county.
20 years ago, but now you got trees growing in it, weeds, and
There's a colony
everything's just come up.
Did they sing?
Yeah,
Never mind.
It's already been run.
Near
That's
Mr.
how it
Truex,
works.
it's
But
probably
that's been
One-
20 years.
all right, guys, one at a time, please. One at a time.
Near
Thank
Mr.
you.
Truex property, there's actually a place where the muskrats have deteriorated. The banks have had it's about 18 inches to 2 feet from being at the road. I don't know, again, exactly what to do. I've shot a few of them, but.
Right.
What if we
So to the core issue is that the development has already been approved. So it isn't like we're allowing him to build more houses.
I understand.
All that's been approved. So we can't go back on that at this point.
Wouldn't ask you to.
Right.
And
so,
this, what they're proposing tonight isn't going to make that any worse. So what they're proposing tonight isn't going to make the problem any worse than it already is.
but we still have an issue that we need to address.
Right.
Would it not make it worse than it already is once those ditches or once those ponds hit their overflow point and start releasing to the 3 pipes at Baxter Lane?
It's going to go across your property regardless. So it's going there, correct.
Okay.
Can I interject there? Because those two ponds actually will release to different ditches.
Which ponds?
The two back.
Two east ponds?
Yeah.
Because those will release to this ditch and this ditch.
And go
And
where?
that's going to the northeast.
Okay. That ditch goes to
And this one goes to the east.
just straight to the east.
The north pond will go ditch on the north property line, and the southern pond will go.
So that'll help.
cut across
So those do not
Yeah, that's gonna-
overflow to the ditch that you're talking about.
I thought we were going to ditch that's backing up.
It won't hurt.
Yeah.
It may not fix it, but it's not going to hurt you.
Can I just, in the early planning stages, we heard several times from Mr. Truran that there's all this water that's coming onto his property and causing him a lot of trouble. So we went to through a lot of design effort to try to get that water off of his property and to take it down a different ditch, which we've done. But we can't do anything, and we don't have the right to do anything downstream on Baxter Lane.
So you're saying that the water's been coming on the property. He's saying it's gotten worse since you started the development.
It was coming through his property before, and now it's coming around his property. But it's still all going to the same outlet on Baxter.
Instead of 3 different outlets, now we've got 3 outlets altogether on the west side that are filling up that ditch is what I heard. Further west, is that correct?
Let me ask Mark a question. Mark, would you say that if we cleaned out that ditch along Baxter Lane, that would solve their problem?
That would certainly help.
Mark, if I can ask a question, and I'm going back, and this map is not good enough, on Mr. Truax's property, I got your name, I'm sorry, didn't there used to be a ditch there that was filled in, and it caused the water, instead of going straight, to go around?
Right, there was a ditch that went approximately where his house is located.
Okay, I thought I remembered okay, so there used to be a ditch which is a straight shot, instead of having to go in a big circle.
So what do we have to do to get that ditch cleaned out?
Got to work on DOT, right?
We can work on DOT, see if they'll do it, but
And what if DOT won't do it?
I'm going to have some help from somebody higher.
Why don't you just dig a bigger pond in the background on that land and, have the water run down that way into the pond?
We're trying to dig a bigger pond.
That's what he's trying to do right now.
Big ponds for that stuff that's in the back.
But that's going to go to the north.
It's still going to relieve pressure off of you.
But so instead of that pressure coming straight down your property line, Now it comes around and back up into your property line. So the water, instead of coming straight across, comes in the back door.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no, without cleaning that ditch and without subjugating that ditch to a level that's lower than Mr. Truex's side ditches and my house side ditches and front yard, now what's happening is the water goes under Baxter Lane, comes back under Baxter Lane, and flows ahead of our side where it should all be on the south side.
And the water used to sit on his land back there because it was a little low, and that actually helped us. But now that he's raised the land up that high to build houses back there, now he's got more water coming our way.
So, Mr. Weatherly, if the ditch was cleared, snagged and cleared on down Baxter Lane, when it gets to the curve, there's still an issue there. So, even if we get that ditch
It's not a snag
cleared,
and clear, though, is it?
No, it's a
excavation.
widening, yeah, it's excavation.
It needs to be like twice as wide and 3 times deeper.
So you got that along that field, and then your point two, when it gets down to the end, that culvert needs to be made bigger, and then even beyond that, that swamp needs to be snagged and cleared. So it's all the way out. But that's what it takes.
and that's not in any of the districts currently.
No, ma'am.
And Mr. Weatherly, approximate cost to do that?
Best guess.
No.
We're not going to do it.
Between the excavation.
How many feet is that? Come here, Mark. I would say
1,500.
No.
Or not.
Do we have a ballpark figure for a mile or something?
We did, but this is excavation.
Yeah.
So let's say that's
That doesn't show all the way
That's the easy. That's the cheapest piece of this whole.
let's say it's
Well,
that's a 1,000 feet
when the tidal wave comes.
1,000, 1,500.
times, let's say $50 a foot.
I'd say 1,500 to be safe.
Then that's,
It's got to be 2,000.
we drop it in half.
Yeah.
At least 30,000. At least. That's just a.
Okay.
That's
All right.
just.
That's a ditch.
Yeah.
So we still have a swamp.
Okay. We're a little bit, okay, thank you, sir, and we're a little bit off of topic. I understand we have a drainage issue downstream that we have to address, but the topic is allowing him to make bigger ponds that are going to flow in a different direction. This drainage issue is a totally different issue that we need to address, not this evening, but we need to address it. The immediate issue is, can we work on getting these ponds built? Do you have any more testimony, Mr. Bissell? Mr. Weatherly, do you have any more testimony? Okay, with that, I'll open a public hearing. I do not have anyone signed up for a public hearing. Who would like to speak during the public hearing? Hearing no one, I will close the public hearing.
I would like to speak.
Well, come on up, sir. Again, if you would, please state your name and address for the record.
My name is Richard Drone. I live at 151 Baxter Lane, Moyock, North Carolina. When you build these ponds, I would like to know if he's going to have an overflow on that. I'd like to know where the water is going to go from these ponds and in which direction, please.
Okay.
That's already been.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Bissell, if you can come answer that question. Hold on 1 second, please. Anyone else want to speak to the public hearing? Okay, with that, I'll close the public hearing. Mr. Bissell, if you can please come up and speak to that. I think you have already addressed where that water is going to flow from those ponds.
I've got my pointer problem again there.
Well, so he can make sure he can see.
Yeah, it's more for him than it is for us. I know where it's going.
Yes, so
If you can
show
explain to him where that water's going.
So the northern pond is going to be drained out, the ditch along the northern property line, and the southern pond is going to drain out a ditch along the southern property line.
That's where the overflow
Going due east.
Right.
The one that goes on the north property line then actually turns and goes to the northeast, across the Virginia state line and into an outlet up in Virginia.
Okay.
Good.
So what you're doing isn't affecting his property at all,
So we're not putting
but we still have an outlining issue.
water from those ponds into the ditch
Okay.
that is backing up onto his property.
Okay. He wasn't paying attention, so I don't know. Okay. So with that, I'll open the floor for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve PB 1822 Allied Properties LLC, since the request is consistent with the 2006 Land Use Plan and the Millioc Small Area Plan, because it is at a density appropriate for the location. LUP Policy HN1 is located in the fastest growing area of the county that continues to evolve as a full-service community, the Millioc Area Policy emphasis. And the request is reasonable and in the public interest because it promotes compatibility between the proposed development and the existing development by providing perimeter open space and buffers, MSAP FLU1. It is located in the appropriate zoning district for the development. It is seeking a change to the plan to retain additional stormwater on site in an effort to reduce the impacts to the nearby lands. In addition, the proposed use is a subdivision. All lots are to be greater than or equal to 20,000 square feet. Install a new culvert under Baxter Lanes to improve the off-site drainage, size to be determined after engineering evaluation. Explore the possibility of routing a portion of stormwater runoff to the northeast. And all residential development will be single family and will conform to the sample building elevations provided.
I have a motion on the floor.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If I can, before we vote on this, Mr. Weatherly, I'd like to make sure that we follow up to the best of our ability with Mr. Troon to see what we can do about easing this issue, be it in that ditch and be it further down line, down the stream. And if we can get an update on that to the board as we progress, that would be great. Thank you, sir. With that, open the floor. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously. Mr. Trim, we will follow up with that and get y'all relieved the best of our ability. Moving on, consideration and action, PB 16-06, Windswept Pines, request for an amended preliminary plat use permit to modify the development, acreage, and stormwater infrastructure for Phase 2 for properties located on the east side of Currituck Highway, tax map 9, parcels 11L and 6A, tax map 9H, parcels OSA-OSC, parcels 1-12, and parcels 42-58, Millioc Township. Anyone that's going to come speak to this, if you could please come forward to be sworn in. If you could please raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. And with that, I'll hand it over to Ms. LaCicero.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now that the rezoning and the conceptual site plan has been modified and approved, we now have to go in and have the use permit to amend the preliminary plat for Windswept Pines. So with the approved conditional rezoning with the modified plan for the stormwater retention in Phase 2, and this plan does not include an increase in the number of lots. There's still 59 lots, residential lots in this subdivision. The modified zoning from the conditional zoning approval that we just did, that it is a subdivision, that all lots will be greater than or equal to 20,000 square feet. They will install a new culvert under Baxter's Lane to improve off-site drainage size to be determined after engineering evaluation. Explore the possibility of rerouting a portion of the stormwater runoff to the northeast, and all residential development will be single-family and conform to the sample building elevations. Those are the zoning requirements. With the use permit, there are 4 findings of fact that we have to make. 2 of these are for the applicant to make, and 2 of these are for the staff to make. And that this use will be in conformity with the land use plan or other officially adopted plan. And staff does find that the Moyock Small Area Plan classifies this area as full service. The proposed development density is at 1.15 units per acre, well below the densities of 1.5 to 3 units per acre stated in the Moyock Small Area Plan. Relevant Moyock Small Area Plan and 2006 Land Use Plan policies. H1N1, Currituck County shall encourage development to occur at densities appropriate for the location. And HN policy HN2, Currituck County recognizes that many estates consume large amounts of land, often without economic purposes. Estate lots have no relationship to agriculture or other resource-based activities, promote small, and make the provision of infrastructure services very costly. The second findings of fact that staff has to make is that the use will not exceed the county's ability to provide adequate public facilities, including but not limited to schools, fire and rescue, law enforcement, and other county facilities. There are still 59 residential lots in this development, and they are still below. They're not adding any lots, so therefore not adding any houses to the capacity that will affect the capacity of our schools. And you see that they're going to generate 14 elementary school students, 4 middle school students, and 7 high school students. But these are already taken into account with the original approval, so that will not have an impact on our school capacity. And since there was so much information given previously, I'm not exactly sure what questions we would have at this point for me. But the applicant should have should go over their 2 findings of fact as well.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. LaCicero at this point? Mr. Bissell, if you could please come forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The 2 suggested findings of fact that we're presenting are, number 1, that the use will not endanger the public health or safety, and we would submit that the stormwater management will be provided in accordance with the stormwater manual and the UDO, and we'll be providing additional retention ponds to manage and retain stormwater runoff in excess of those reference requirements, that the health department has found all 57 lots to be provisionally suitable for wastewater, and their recommendations are being followed in the design. The project is being designed and has been designed in accordance with DEQ's standards for erosion control, that for safety reasons all lots are being accessed from interior streets so that we don't have a traffic safety problem on Baxter. And for those reasons, I would submit that the use does not endanger the public health or safety. The second one is that the land to the west has been developed into single-family homes. The land to the north is farmland and residential. The land to the south is a combination of farmland and single-family lots that are being developed in a manner that is consistent with what we're proposing. The values will be similar or slightly above in some cases the values of the homes and lots in adjacent neighborhoods. And for those reasons, we believe that the use will not injure the value of adjoining or abutting lands and will be in harmony with the surrounding area. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Bissell. Any questions for Mr. Bissell? Thank you, sir. With that, I'll open a public hearing. I do not have anyone signed up to speak to this issue. Would someone like to speak to this issue during the public hearing? Hearing no one, I'll close the public hearing and open the floor for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve PB 16-6 Winsett Pines amended preliminary plat use permit because the applicant has demonstrated the proposed use meets the use permit review standards of the UDO. The first fact of finding the use will not endanger the public health or safety. The applicant findings are stormwater management will be provided in accordance with the current Currituck stormwater manual and the UDO. Additional stormwater retention ponds will be constructed to manage and retain stormwater in excess of the referenced requirements. Albemarle Regional Health Services evaluated the new lots for suitability for wastewater disposal and provisionally approved each lot as being capable of properly treating domestic wastewater with property filled and drained lots. The project is being designed in accordance with the NC Department of Energy, Mineral and Land Resources. Sedimentation and erosion control standards will therefore minimize erosion and will contain siltation on site. For safety reasons, all lots are being accessed from interior streets. Fact, finding 2, the use will not injure the value of adjoining or abutting lands and will be in harmony with the area which is located. Land to the west has been developed into single-family homes. The land to the north is farmland and residential. Land to the south is farmland and single-family lots. Land to the east is farmland and woodland. The tract will be developed similarly to the adjacent Phase 1 subdivision. Values will be similar to those in adjacent subdivisions. The use will not injure the value of adjoining or abutting lands and will be in harmony with the surrounding area. Third finding is the use will be in conformity with the land use plan or other officially adopted plans. The Mayock Small Area Plan classifies this area as full service. The proposed development density is only 1.15 units per acre, well below the densities of 1.5 to 3 units per acre envisioned in the Mayock Small Area Plan. The 2006 Land Use Plan Policy HN1 to be included. 2006 Land Use Plan Policy HN2, 2006 Land Use Plan Policy TR12, the 2006 Land Use Policy PR6, the 2006 Land Use Policy WQ3, the Mayock Small Area Policy IS4, the Mayock Small Area Policy IS5. The fourth finding of fact is the use will not exceed the county's ability to provide adequate public facilities, including but not limited to schools, fire, rescue, law enforcement, and other county facilities. Applicable state standards and guidelines shall be followed to determine when the public facilities are adequate. Ms. LaCicero pointed out the school numbers, and I will include that in my motion.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
I'll be happy to repeat it if you'd like for me to.
We have a motion on the floor.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously. Moving on, PB 18-24, Currituck County Flood Maps and Ordinance. Request to adopt the flood insurance rate maps, flood insurance study, and amend section of the Unified Development Ordinance for compliance with the Model Coastal Flood Damage Prevention Ordinance. And with that, I'll hand it over to Ms. LaCicero.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hopefully my voice will hold out. The National Flood Insurance Program, as a coastal county, this is a very important program for us here in Currituck. It is a partnership between local communities and the federal government to protect lives and property and to help regulate and protect us against flooding. It is administered by FEMA, and FEMA has partnered with the North Carolina Public Safety to produce the what we call the flood insurance rate maps. FIRMs is a lingo that we use, and North Carolina is a very lucky state is that we are now completely digital. We have our DFIRMs, which is what we use to for flood insurance, to tell somebody what flood zone that they are in, and what they need to build their house to, what level, what standard they need to build their house to, are now completely digital. So the participating communities, if you're participating community within the National Flood Insurance Program, you must adopt maps and you must enforce flood development regulations. We are also a participating member of the Community Rating System. We call it CRS at the staff level. It's developed by FEMA to help communities have reduced flood insurance premiums. And we do participate in that. We do things as a community to keep our flood insurance premiums low for our citizens. We have Currituck has participated in the National Flood Insurance Program since 1984. That is our first firm date. The current maps that are effective now were approved in 2005. FEMA, working with the state, have updated those maps, and the preliminary maps, what we're calling them, they have been available for public review since November of 2015. At the work session, we spoke about some of the science behind these changes in these maps and the different storms and the models that they use for the changes in the maps in our firms. The new firms will become effective for insurance in December 21st of this year. Here in Currituck County, we're seeing significant changes to areas impacted by velocity and wave action, or V zones as we call them, and areas in the special flood hazard areas, and our base flood elevations. We've seen a drastic change in that. Some statistics from that, the new firms countywide, our current maps, we have 168,000 acres in the special flood hazard areas. Those are the AE zones where we talk about, and some A. The BFEs are greater base flood elevations, what BFE stands for. That's basically the level that you would need to build your house to give it some level of protection. The BFE of greater than 4 feet, we're nearly 160,000 acres, just under that. So that's 95% of the special flood hazard area. And so then just under 9,000 acres is the BFEs are less than or equal to 4 feet. In the new map, the new maps, we have 163,000 acres that's going to be in the special flood hazard areas. And you see pretty much almost the numbers have flip-flopped. We have just under 4,000 acres of BFE greater than 4 feet, whereas we had nearly 160,000 acres at the current maps. And with the BFE is less than or than equal to 4 feet is nearly 160,000 acres. So we're seeing a definite change in the level of protection in some of our areas. This is especially impactful on the beach with the Corolla building stock. Currently, we have 2,300 buildings in the special flood hazard area. With the new maps, we're only going to have 178. We're going to see nearly a 90% decrease in our V-zone properties. Those are the ones that are pretty much oceanfront that are going to get the wave action. And so for the Corolla and the off-road area, the current maps with the base flood elevation greater than 4 feet, we have basically 4,400 acres. And with the new maps, only 724 acres are going to be with the base flood elevation greater than 4 feet. So you can see the statistics. So just a little bit, it makes staff a bit hesitant that we're seeing such a drastic change in our base flood elevation and in our the VE zones. So just for illustration purposes, this is a section of Whalehead, a residential community on the beach. I know it's kind of hard to see, but all the parcels that are outlined in green are currently they have an effective flood hazard area. They're in some level, either VE or an AE zone. The blue is the new, with the new maps, where the special flood hazard area is. So you can see there's significant areas, properties that are coming out of the flood zone that we know still has a very big potential to flood. So, so with the new maps, also come some changes to our current UDO, our flood damage prevention regulations. And these are going to reflect the model ordinance. The state and FEMA gives us a model ordinance to go by to make sure we're hitting all their standards. And you have the complete, you have all the language in front of you in your packet, but I'm just going to go over the highlights since this is pretty significant. Is going to incorporate the digital flood insurance rate maps, the DFIRMs, by reference. Instead of the panels that we used to have, the little paper maps that we'd pull out and we'd have all these different panels, it's now seamless, a GIS layer, if you guys are familiar with using our GIS system. And also, this language incorporates technical bulletins, the International Building Code and Coastal Zone construction for development activities. Those in the AE zone considered tanks, fences, bulkheads, retaining walls, roads, and road crossings. In the VE zone, it addresses non-structural fill and grading, concrete pads, swimming pools, spas, elevators and lifts, decks and patios, fences, bulkheads, and retaining walls. The references to the NAVD 1988 instead of mean sea level, that's North American Vertical Datum 1988 instead of mean sea level. This language also clarifies the timing of elevation certificates and other certifications that you need during the process of building in a special flood hazard area. And it also, we heard back from the state today about some of our issues that we had with their model language, but it's going to establish a civil penalty and not the criminal penalty. I didn't get this updated from the time that we heard back from the state this afternoon. They had either option in their model ordinance, and we're just going to go with the civil penalty and not go through the criminal process. Some other changes. Reorganizes our substantial addition and improvement section. Just so you know, substantial improvement is reconstruction or rehabilitation, addition or other improvement of a structure that equal or exceeds 50% of the value of the structure. And this is a big one. The county regulatory flood protection elevation, which is the regulatory, this is what we use for issuing permits and how the standard that we want these homes built to and these structures built to. Currently we have 1 foot is the base flood elevation plus 1 foot of freeboard. Due to the big changes in our flood maps, staff is suggesting a higher level of protection for those properties still left in the flood zone, that we increase our freeboard by 1 additional foot so that we have 2 foot of freeboard for all those properties that are left in the special flood hazard area. And the planning board did supported staff recommendation of 2 foot of freeboard, and so tonight those are the two big issues I guess left would be the 2 foot of freeboard and an effective date for regulatory for the permitting purposes of this information. So just a graphic of flood insurance premiums. The blue line here is a VE zone, and the green is a regular AE zone. So the velocity, our ocean front. If we just have base flood elevation, you see that those premiums are between $8,000 and $9,000 for a VE zone, and probably around $1,800 for an AE zone. But you see, as your freeboard increases, you're seeing significant savings in your flood insurance premiums. And this is from FEMA. This information's from FEMA. So this is where staff would like to request that 2 foot of freeboard. So you'll see that that if you're going to have an additional cost to the homeowner, it's going to be saving money over the long term for in flood insurance. And we moved through that pretty quickly. This is a lot of information, and it is very important, in our county for us to be participants and good stewards in the National Flood Insurance Program. And I'll be happy to answer any questions I can about the changes in the maps and our suggested language.
Ms. LaCicero, I have a question. You were talking about raising the freeboard to 2 feet. Would you need, for purpose of a motion tonight, for us to include that in a motion, or is that in our packet as a staff recommendation?
That is a staff recommendation.
Okay. And that is included in our packet. There's so much of it I can't.
Yeah, it's included. It is included in the language that's presented before you tonight.
If I can, Ms. LaCicero, I know you stated that you went through that rather quickly, but we have gone over this in a work session just at our last meeting, so the board is aware of what's happening and fully understands what's going on here this evening. Just want to put that out there. So, any further questions for Ms. LaCicero? With that, I'll open a public hearing. Would anyone like to speak to this issue this evening during the public hearing section? With that, I'll close the public hearing and open the floor for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'll go ahead and move to approve PB 1824. Currituck County, since the request is consistent with the land use plan, because it will conserve the floodplains and other coastal features and the natural storm protection functions and the natural resources, given recognition to public health, safety, and the welfare issues. It includes requirements for development and redevelopment within special flood hazard areas to meet the standards of the NFIP and flood damage prevention ordinance, land use plan policy NH2. It recognizes the potential risk of life and property within the special flood hazard areas and implements measures to mitigate the risks, and land use plan policy NH1. And the request is reasonable and in the public interest because it continues the county's participation in the National Flood Insurance Program that enables property owners in participating communities to purchase insurance protection against losses from flooding. It minimizes damage to public and private property due to flooding. And I want to include the following modifications to the UDO text amendment to include a regulatory effective date of this text amendment. The effective date to be November 6, 2018. Remove item 4, 9.6.2, the criminal penalties from the text amendment. The enforcement of the ordinance will continue through the civil process, and modify the following definitions to include the adoption date of the initial floodplain management regulations and the effective date of the flood insurance rate maps. The existing building for the purpose of Section 7.4, flood damage prevention of any building and or structure or which the start of construction commenced before November 1st, 1984. New construction for the purpose of Section 7.4, flood damage prevention structures for which the start of construction commenced on or after July 18th, 1984. The effective date of the initial floodplain management regulations and includes any subsequent improvements to such structures. And post-firm construction or other development for which the start of construction occurred on or after November 1st, 1984. The effective date of the initial flood insurance rate map. Construction or other development for which the start construction occurred before November 1st, 1984. The effective date of the initial flood insurance rate map. And that's going to be my...
I would second that, but before I do, I'll ask you to amend that and make the start date November 15th. Staff needs a few more days to confer with some stuff from the state.
Okay, then I'll amend my motion to make the effective date of November 15, 2018.
And I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously. With that, we'll take a 10-minute recess to help Ms. LaCicero over there. Okay, folks, we're back in session. Moving on to...
Mr. Chairman, if I
yes,
could just
sir.
interject?
Yes, sir.
In reference to the flood maps,
Yes, sir.
I remember a discussion we had, and we might want to remind our citizens out here, and Mr. Scanlon might be able to say it a little bit better than me when it comes to the fact that if you drop the insurance that you have now for flood insurance, and how does it exactly go, Mr. Scanlon, again?
Well, I think staff and it has a bit of a concern with the adoption of the new maps. There's a significant amount of structures now that will not be required to carry federal flood insurance. And I guess the point is, although you're not required to, property owners should probably think twice or consult with their insurance agent before they drop it. It is my understanding that if you come out of the program and never need to go back in the program, when you re-enter, you'll be paying the market rate at that time, whatever the market rate is. And or just because you're not in the floodplain doesn't mean you might not be subjected to some localized flooding or some flooding issues. And so make sure you still have the appropriate coverage to cover you in case you do have flooding. And so I think there's a concern that so many parcels are coming out of the floodplain that people will rush to drop the coverage, in fact, when they still might have an exposure. So I think it's important that they continue to talk with their insurance agent before they make such a decision to drop their coverage.
To substantiate that exact comment, the house that we have will be coming out of the flood zone with the new maps, and I'm in the middle of a flood damage claim, that had we not had flood damage, I'd be facing a $10,000+ maintenance or repair bill. So the word is to the citizens, just because you're coming out of a flood zone doesn't mean that you still don't have a flood risk. And if you can, you should keep flood insurance wherever you can.
I was going to ask, could we put something to that effect on out on the county website?
We certainly can.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, just because you're out doesn't mean you're out.
I think the next focus would be a good place to place that.
Okay. Okay, moving on. PB 18-20 Ponderosa Enterprises, Inc., request for conditional rezoning of 11.6 acres from general business and agriculture to conditional general business C-GB for property located in Maple adjoining Ponderosa Mobile Home Park to the north, parcel identification number 0052-000-022B-0000, Crawford Township. And with that, I'll hand it over to Ms. LaCicero.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At your previous meeting, you considered this conditional zoning from straight GB and Ag, AG, to a conditional GB for this property. There was a concern that the board voiced about the proposed uses that would be allowed at that property, first because it was near the airport and it is across from the Maple Community Park. He directed staff to work with the applicant and his representative, his agent, Mr. Eddie Hyman, to bring back a list of potential uses on this property. And that list was included in your agenda packet, and I can go over those quickly. The first, there's several agricultural related uses that are allowed in GB. The agricultural, horticulture, agri-education, agri-entertainment, agribusiness, equestrian facilities, farmers market, nursery production, roadside markets, agricultural research facility, distribution hub for agricultural products, and farm machinery sales, rental and service, and silviculture. Those uses are the ag uses that are allowed in our GB zoning district. The next set of uses that the applicant was willing to put on this property are GB or uses that are in our general business district. That would be dwelling to live work, dwelling upper story, youth club facility, adult daycare center, child care center, college or university, vocational or trade school, religious institution, animal grooming, animal shelter, kennel, veterinary clinic, dinner theater, restaurant with indoor or outdoor seating, specialty eating establishment, business and sales office, professional services office, fitness center, recreation, indoor recreation, theater, artisan food and beverage producer, convenience store, drugstore, pharmacy, entertainment establishment, financial institution, funeral home, grocery store, laundromat, personal service establishment, repair establishment, retail sales establishment, and boat and marine rentals, sales and service. These are the uses that the applicant agreed to limit for that property. And this is a little bit of a, he does not have a user for this property, so it's very generalized and a conceptual plan, and from wanting to rezone his property to conditional GB, and I'll be glad to answer any questions that you may have.
Mr. Cicero, one of the things that was probably preeminent was the gas station that was there. And the rewrite here, or the allowable uses, it says convenience store. Does that mean it gets a gas station, or is it just a...
Or will any of these items allow for a fueling station?
The convenience store would allow for a fueling station.
Just the fueling, anything else like?
I believe so.
It's page 127.
Any further questions for Ms. LaCicero? Any discussion?
I guess, like I said, the biggest point, maybe a sticking point, was having a fueling station there for us. So I don't know if that bears any further discussion or removal from the list if we decide to approve.
And the only thing you said that would qualify for a fueling station would be the store.
The convenience store, yes. I'm going to try to look through our UDO quickly and verify that.
Mr. Scanlon, I have a question for you that, and maybe Mr. Beaumont can answer. We've had some discussion about future growth of the airport. In that potential growth, would that increase the overlays, or would that have any impairment on what this property?
When was the last overlay? Isn't that we're about to
We're in the
re-engage
process of updating the airport layout plan now. There has been conversation about lengthening the runway, and obviously, if that was to be done, that it will certainly change the boundaries of these restrictive zones.
Okay, I just want to be cognizant of that, because if there are some increased growth at the airport, how that could affect this piece of property.
Would the runway extension go any further to the south, or would it be coming from the other direction?
There's the greatest potential for the greatest length is on this end of the runway. At the opposite end, you have a little bit more distance you go before you get into wetlands, and so
that would.
So the greater the opportunity to expand the runway is going to be on
closer to the
south end,
closer to the highway.
Yes, sir.
And I believe that was 500 feet.
Yeah. And if if you go back and recall at your last meeting, you had this overlay that had these triangular pieces that extended onto this piece of property. If you were to add 500 foot, that map would change, and the impact in those zones would change across this property.
So if this were approved this evening, would that affect the ability to stretch that runway if we needed to, because of those overlays?
Yeah, that's. I'm not aware what the answer to that would be. If it would prohibit, if something already penetrated into those areas, I don't know for a fact if that would be a prohibition from being able to extend it or not. That's a question we can find out.
That seems to be probably a pretty important distinction that needs to be made. It didn't come up last time, and I was doing a little research. I've talked to some of you about this, but just looking at airports in general and runways, I looked at Richmond International. And at the end of the runway, directly in the flight path, is a Wawa gas station, which is arguably quite a bit bigger than what we're going to do here. Norfolk International also has just a slew of buildings and other things at the end of their runways, and just, you know, when we think about airports, we just don't see everything that's around them because we're on the road and it's blocked by trees and buildings and everything else. So I think this particular project stands out more because it's visible more than anything, and not necessarily out of character for what transpires around airports, in some cases at least. So just something to bear in mind. That's the reason I asked for the flight data today was just to see what our airport was actually doing, so we would have, you know, just how many flights were coming and going and where we're headed. So.
Hearing no further discussion, I'll open the floor for a motion.
At this point in time, I personally am not prepared to make a motion. Just the question of rezoning this property and putting things at the end of it may affect future development of the airstrip. I think that's an important question that maybe we should find out the answer to before we decide one way or the other how this property will be zoned.
I would have, just one second, Mr. Hyman. I would have a question for Mr. McCree. Would us determining this evening, would that have any bearing on what might happen in the future?
I believe if you deny, it would necessitate a 1-year period before it could be brought back.
No, let me restate the question. Do we have the ability to deny this based on what might happen in the future?
Oh, well, it's within your discretion.
Okay.
Whether to deny or not. It's a legislative action.
Okay, Mr. Hyman, you wouldn't say something?
Yes, I would.
Please step forward if you would.
We have worked very hard with planning staff, with TRC, and trying to feel what your needs were and what your wishes were for this property. And we have put forth what you see within the county guidelines, within the lines drawn on the overlays, the densities that are set out by those lines. And we're trying to get a nice convenience store or the potential to put one there within the very close proximity to the activities and the Y area, the ball fields, the COA. We think it'd be a good fit. And everybody up till now has also thought that. As airports grow, people grow around them, and this, I think, would be a valid use of this property. I think it would be a valid concept, and if it would come to life as a convenience store, campus type setting with a restaurant or something nearby that would appeal to the people that use the facilities you have there. And that's why we brought it forth, to try to be able to put a conceptual plan together to improve the marketability and entice somebody or embrace somebody that comes ahead and says, yes, we'd like to do that on this site. Again, we have met the lines in the sand that were drawn for the airport. There's a major highway there that's good exposure for us, but it's also, the airplanes coming across it. As I've read the airport zones, the overlay zones, they were more concerned about noise than they were about, there was some limits on density, but not much, and you could still do a major subdivision within these areas. You just had to, in one of the areas, restricted density. Again, like I said, as I read through it, it limited more the noise restriction more than the concern of an impact crash. And I know the fuel areas on these convenience stores are underground storage, so the aircraft would be probably carrying more exposed fuel on board than than the convenience store would have as a hazard. But that's speculation. Heaven forbid we ever have an impact anywhere. I've seen a couple of planes go down myself, but they were actually not at the end of any runway. They were associated to airports, but not in these zones. Anyway, we'd like for you to give consideration to this as a possible or a conditional rezoning as we have put out in the conceptual plan, and understand that if it did come forward as a valid site plan in conformity with what you see before you, you would have another say from TRC to planning board to your board to control what went in there. So anyway, I would just ask for your consideration.
I would have a question. In your site plan, you had the gas station situated in a certain direction. Is there a way, or do we have the ability, when it does come forward, to move that?
Well, that was discussed, and I think we agreed that if you wanted the pump islands to the side, with the storefront moved closer, would not be a problem.
And do you currently have anyone interested in this property?
No, we do not.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
No, please.
I was just going to make a motion.
Okay.
If I could, for your motion.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Hyman.
Thank you.
Mr. Craig, I guess my question. If today we sit there and we approve it, and the new overlay comes in before they come out to us and said, here, we're ready to build, at that point, can we say, well, the gas station isn't a fit because of the overlay or the extension of the runway? Or can we change anybody's, what we give them today, can we change it down the road if circumstances change, such as with an overlay, crash zone, whatever it might be?
Typically, with a general zoning, you may change it at any time. No one can have an expectation or a right to a specific zoning district. However, this is conditional zoning, so I'm not sure right offhand whether you would have the unilateral ability to modify the zoning from that which might be approved tonight.
So I've been around a couple airports, and almost every airport gets encroached on. That's the way things work. I've been part of and engaged in and had to go through many meetings where the discussion of encroachment upon airspace and the unintended consequences of allowing that growth. And yeah, there's the gas station at the end of Richmond, and there's stuff all around Norfolk. But I think if you ask the airport planners today, because I don't know that they really had a whole lot of control back in the day when the growth began or when it started, they'd all go back and rethink that, I think, almost unequivocally. We are remiss in not having a updated airport plan, which is in the process of getting updated and getting that overlay changed. I think that committing to maintaining safe channels of aviation traffic in and out, I think, enhances our appeal or application or grant request for runway extensions in the future and potential expansion based upon some of the topics that we had during the work session. We have other general business. This is currently zoned ag, and with the exception of the sliver of general business to the side, I am not sure that changing that to a GB is in the best interest of that air park or that airport from a safety. Going down this list, I'll be honest with you, I expected like 5 things on the list. And things like a movie theater and daycares, and That's a gathering of a lot of people, which timing being really miserable would be a really tragic event. So with that said, Mr. Chairman, I move to deny PB 1820 because the request is not consistent with the land use plan because due to its close proximity to Currituck County's runway and airfield operations in and out of there and the expected growth of that airport, I believe it's going to pose a public safety threat or a public safety issue. And the request is not reasonable and not in the best interest because, again, based upon potential safety issues. Furthermore, there may be impact. I certainly don't know, but there may be impact with our ability to apply and receive grants to expand the airport and increase our operations.
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Nay. Motion passes 6-1.
Thank y'all.
Thank you, sir. Moving on to new business board appointments. If we can start with number 1, would we like to go down all of them and approve them at the end? Is that satisfactory for everyone?
I might need to take and recuse myself on item number 1. It's a family member.
I think it would be appropriate to allow Commissioner Hall to recuse himself.
Okay. We'll allow Commissioner Hall to recuse himself from item number 1.
Do we have to do that in a motion?
That'd be appropriate, yes.
I'd like to make a motion to recuse Mr. Hall from the first board appointment.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously.
Can we
You
go
wish
ahead
me to
and do
leave for
that
this
first one?
Excuse me?
Can we go ahead and do that first
Yeah,
one?
I think
and then
Commissioner Hall should step
Yeah,
out of the
that's
room.
fine. That's fine. So consider Kelsey Hall for appointment to the Joint Nursing Domiciliary Community Advisory Committee.
I will make that appointment, or motion for that appointment.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously.
I'd like to invite Mr. Hall back into the...
Moving on to Library Board of Trustees.
Mr. Chairman, I move to appoint Mike Faust to the Library Board of Trustees. He will be replacing Tom Oakes.
Mr. Chairman, I would also like to reappoint Lee Dix for another term, also on the Library Board of Trustees.
Okay, we have two appointments. Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously. Planning Board?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to appoint Joanne DeBello to replace John McCauley.
I'll second that.
We have a second. Any other appointments to the Planning Board? We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously. Senior Citizens Advisory?
Mr. Commissioner, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to appoint Mike Williams to the Senior Citizens Advisory Board.
Second.
Any further appointments to the Senior Citizens Advisory Board? We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously. Any other board appointments this evening? Hearing none, we'll move on to the consent agenda.
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously. County Manager's report?
Nothing tonight, thank you.
Thank you. With that, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Everybody's ready.
Everybody jump on that one, why don't you? Now we're going to wake up. Great. Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Motion passes unanimously. With that, open a special meeting of the Tourism Development Authority for budget amendments, and I'll hand it over to Mr. Scanlon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You have, excuse me, 2 budget amendments for your consideration. The first one is to provide funding to replace air conditioning units at the Moyock Welcome Center Visitor Center. The second one is actually more of a budgetary administrative budget amendment. It is to move money from a repair and maintenance general line item into a vehicle maintenance line item. So it's not an increase of the budget in any fashion. It's just making monies available specifically for vehicle maintenance versus generic maintenance line item. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions for Mr. Scanlon?
Nope. Motion for approval.
Second.
We have a motion in 2 seconds. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously. And with that, I'll call for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you.